entrepreneurial, leadership, intellectual. This is the Cultural Connections Podcast.
And hello, everybody. My name is Brian Ives, and I am the producer and the host of the Cultural Connections Podcast. Before I introduce our guest today, I want to remind all of our viewers at home, whether you are watching this podcast video-wise on one of our platforms or listening to the podcast, we are recording live, though, however, on Facebook on Wednesday, April 26th, 2023. Therefore, if you have a question for our guest today, please comment below with your question and we'll do our best to answer the question live. Today on the podcast, we have a very interesting show for you. We're going to be going behind the scenes, taking a behind the scenes look on recruitment. Joining me on the podcast is Junya Yoshida. Junya is the co-founder and director of FYND Recruitment. He was born in Japan and raised in the US. After graduating from the university, he moved back to Japan to start his career in recruitment, first starting at a major UK-based recruitment firm in Tokyo and subsequently moving on to a startup recruitment agency. After helping grow the startup agency, he went on to co-found FYND Recruitment, a people-centric recruitment agency. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks very much for having me, Brian. It's good to meet you, and I'm excited to have a chat. Yeah, thanks.
You as well. I'm glad to have you on. So before we go any further, I always like I gave a little bit of an introduction to you there, but I'd like you to give us a little bit more detail about your background before we go any further, and then we'll go a little bit further into the podcast here. So can you introduce yourself a little bit further?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, as you said, I was born here in Japan, but I very, very early when I was one, I moved to America, and specifically, I grew up in Oregon, and so I spent most of my life in Oregon, and kind of bounced around between, well, my mom's side of the family's in the UK, my dad's side of the family's in Japan, so I bounced around a bit, and from the UK, Japan, and America, but again, most of my education has been in the US. Went to school, through high school in Oregon, then went down to California for university, went to San Diego, so UC San Diego. And then after that, obviously, I was looking for a job after I graduated. And, I was looking at Japan. I was always interested in Japan because I would visit Japan, and I always found, I had a lot of fun in Japan. I found it really interesting, specifically Tokyo. And so I targeted Tokyo for my job search. So I came here and I went to a recruitment firm, one of the large agencies here, similar to my first job where I worked at a large UK agency. And they sat me down, asked me kind of the standard thing that I do now is they screen me. And then they asked me, oh, by any chance at the end of it, would you be interested in recruitment? And I never really considered it and kind of thought about it. They let me know kind of what the job entails, talking to people, like helping them find jobs. As it's very kind of what I heard is very dynamic, very new things every day. Talking to a lot of people, which I like to do. So I kind of went home. I thought about it, and I said, okay, yeah, this is something that I think would be interesting. It's a little bit out of my kind of comfort zone. I never expected myself to be in such kind of a position, because at the end of the day, it's kind of a sales position, right? And something that I never even thought about. But I wanted to challenge it, so I started interviewing at that company, and it kind of aligned my interview process. Towards the end of it, there was the Boston Career Forum, and I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with it, but it's a large it's kind of a career forum. It's in Boston, and it's the largest one in the UK. Well, it's the largest one in America for Japanese companies hiring in the States. So I know a lot of people who have got jobs there, and so I went there, and there's different recruitment firms there. So I was going to do my final interview with this company, at the Boston Career Forum, and I figured, okay, well, I'm interviewing there. Why don't I go and check out these other recruitment companies? Then I found the company that I ultimately got the job from, and they interviewed me, put me through this workshop, and at the same day they gave me an offer, and it was very quick, and I took it, and I moved to Japan in 2018, early 2018, to start my job there. And then I was there about a year and a half to 2 years. And then I moved over to start this, to help start this startup from one of my colleagues who I worked with at this large recruitment agency. And so he started his own company. I was employee number 2. I was there for, let's say, close to, let's say, 3-4 years. And then I started this new company. So FYND, FYND Recruitment. And I started this company with a partner here, and yeah, we launched last year. It's been pretty exciting. So yeah, that's kind of the story and what has happened until today.
Oh, that's great. That's very interesting story so far. Absolutely. I guess my next question to you then is, let's get into what inspired you to get into a recruitment agency, and we'll leave that as a separate. Let's start off with what inspired you to start a recruitment agency.
Yeah, it's something that, so with the progression of my career in recruitment, I started at this large agency, and these large agencies, just to give kind of a background on the types of agencies there are here in Japan, I think abroad as well. There are these large like agencies that basically work with all sorts of types of clients. They have huge teams that specialize in, let's say, financial services, healthcare, specific areas like HR or IT. IT is broken down usually quite, it's a big area. All sorts of teams, and they're very specialized. Each person is gonna cover a very specific type of role, and that's what I did for the start of my career. And that gave me kind of, something that I appreciate with the big agencies. They give you a lot of training. It's a really good learning experience. But ultimately, with these big agencies, it's very kind of a volume-based type of recruitment. So it's what's the best word? Kind of like a factory. You get CVs in, you work with candidates, you send them to your clients. It's very much kind of very process oriented in that sense. And then moving to this startup, my last company, kind of allowed me to kind of be more in control of my own area and recruit in a way that I wanted to recruit to an extent. So moving from a large agency to what it would be a startup or a boutique recruitment firm, where it's very small number of people, let's say like 10 people or even less. So you get to have some more independence and recruit and kind of run your own desk in that sense. But still, I found that there was definitely pressure to send profiles out to clients, and that's kind of a thing within the industry is KPIs, right? We need to send out a certain amount of CVs, things like that, and make a certain amount of calls. And so it's very much kind of that style of recruitment didn't necessarily align with what I wanted to do. And there was a few processes and applications and candidates that I would help where I got the chance to really kind of get to know them and work with them very closely. And I think that really gave me some perspective of, okay, this is how I really want to recruit. I want to get to know candidates. In a sense, I want to take my time to get to know them, and I don't want it to be a process kind of oriented where we're just pumping out CVs to clients, right, or resumes to clients. So I felt that kind of, what's the word? That want to be able to do this completely independently and recruit in the way that I want to recruit. And I think that ultimately, especially on the candidate side, candidates appreciate that. Candidates don't want to just be a CV. They don't want to just be a resume and kind of a skill sheet where they're just sent to multiple clients. They want to work directly with a headhunter or a recruitment agency, so they can really understand them and then really support them through a job search without having that pressure of, let's get this person a job so we can kind of, in a sense, get money from it, right? So that really motivated me and my partner as well. He felt the same way. So we started this company where we can really kind of take our time in the recruitment process and get to know our candidates and clients very closely, so we can fully support them.
That's great. I mean, it's a great story. Absolutely. I just want to
Mm.
recap here before we go any further to anyone that is just tuning in, either whether you're watching the live version of this here with us on Facebook this evening, or if you are tuning in, listening, or however you're watching or listening to the podcast, where you are watching watching or listening to the Cultural Connections podcast. We are live on Facebook on Wednesday, April 26th, 2023. And we're talking a little bit behind the scenes look at recruitment. And we're joined by Junya Yoshida, who has started his own company in recruitment and is going to continue throughout this podcast to tell us about his recruitment company. So my next question to you then is, let's talk about your company specifically here. And I'd be interested to know what makes your company unique.
Yeah, I think definitely, and that's always the challenge to when you're. I
Absolutely.
guess this is not the first company that I've started, so I learned that very quickly how to stand out. And when we get on the phone with, let's say, a new client who asks us, well, why should we work with you? And I think ultimately, the reasons for starting this company are the same reasons we give to our clients and candidates. We're not just going to send you tons of CVs or resumes. We're going to, take our time and don't expect, 10, 15 CVs a week, from us. That's not going to be the way that we work. But when we do send you a candidate, it's going to be a very good candidate, and we're going to know a lot about them. And we're going to be working very closely with them. So if you have any questions, we're here to really support their job search. And I think, ultimately, candidates feel good about it. They feel supported, but also the client side, we're not wasting our time with sending you completely random profiles. We're going to send you good profiles. We're going to send you ones that really match let's say, job description, or even, since we work very closely with our clients, we're going to know a lot of information that's off of the job description as well. So we'll be able to match the candidate quite well, and I think it saves a lot of time.
That's great. And I think that's very important. Then my next
Yeah.
question to you along those lines is what are some of the biggest challenges you face then with your company?
Yeah, that's of course, before this I was just a recruiter sitting at the desk, and thinking about the company as a whole and the challenges that we face is something that's definitely new to me. I think early developing a client base is always important. That's ultimately, survival. You have to
Right.
get clients, and you have to get, clients that are willing to work with you very closely as well. So you want to be able to develop those relationships, and in this case, like, stand out as well, as we talked about. So developing that kind of like that brand identity, and creating kind of a reputation as well. We're very new, so I think when we, let's say, compare ourselves to agencies who've been around in the market for years or decades, that's something that we can't really, we can't say that to our clients. We can't say, oh, we've been here for 20 years, and we have a database that has 100,000 candidates in it, so we can just access people very, very quickly. So standing out in kind of this early stage and seeing what we can offer, or how we can kind of bring value to our clients without that let's say, long history and all these like large big resources. It's kind of what we bring in terms of our network and how we work with clients, and how we work with candidates. I think that in this kind of competitive market is the main challenge. And I think on top of this, kind of more forward looking, of course, like adapting new technologies, learning how to use AI, these AI tools, and how it's going to change the market. This is something that we're thinking about every single day, and it's something that you can't really predict, but you have to somehow prepare for it and use these tools as much as possible, and kind of figure out what ways the market might change and how people might search for jobs, how clients might search for candidates using these tools, and be there to kind of, in a sense, like potentially switch gears, adapt, and use them so we're not behind in this like race to use AI, because it moves so fast, right? So even over the last like couple months, it's crazy how much has changed. So that's something that's more forward looking, and that'll definitely be a challenge.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, as someone in the communications industry and in my career path, personally, technology is a huge factor, I think, today in being on top of it, and is such an important thing. And if you don't stay ahead of it, you're going to get behind very quickly and lose out very quickly with technology, especially. So it's so important. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm gonna recap one more time, to remind our viewers watching or listening that this is the Cultural Connections podcast. We're live on Wednesday, April 26th, 2023, talking about giving a behind the scenes look into recruitment. And we're joined by someone who knows a lot about that. That's Junya Yoshida, who's with us all the way from Tokyo, Japan. If you have questions for Junya during the broadcast today, or even if it's afterwards, we'll get the questions to him. You can comment below here on Facebook here and comment your questions, and we'll be sure to do our best to getting them answered. My next question then to you would be is how do you go about identifying and vetting potential candidates for your clients?
Yeah. I mean, this is an important part of our job. And I think that we can kind of break it down into 4 different ways that we usually go about identifying candidates. And the first way would be, we kind of break down the candidate pool. The first types of candidates that you can quickly reach out to, and these candidates very much about, are the ones that I've worked with before. So candidates that I've talked to, I work with candidates that I've been in contact with for years, and I help them change jobs. So I know these people very, very well, and I can reach out to them very quickly about jobs. Then there's kind of the next level, which would be referral candidates. So candidates that I've worked with, candidates that I know, might know someone who's looking for a job. And when I'm talking to them, I go, hey, do you know anyone who might be interested in this type of position? And they go, oh, okay, so they have their own network as well that we can tap into. And then third would be online platforms. And this is kind of the standard way that recruiters look for candidates. And so I'm sure that a lot of people listening have received like LinkedIn messages. LinkedIn is a big one. It's probably the most used platform to find candidates. But there are also like local job boards here in Japan, and local like LinkedIn style of platforms or online like, I wouldn't say social media, but yeah, where you can create a profile, let them know that you're looking for a job, and then we can reach out to you through there as well. So online platforms is another one. And then last one would be, to be honest, just like in-person events. If it's going to be some sort of, let's say, professional event, or like a convention or something like that, we visit that, we network there. But also, being in Tokyo is it's a big city, but there's a lot of people here, and of course, I'm out and about here, and I meet a lot of people, and that's another way we actually talk to candidates as well. So those are kind of the main four ways that we would attract candidates and identify candidates. But then after that, we go into more of the kind of the screening and the application process. So once we get a job description or a contact from a client, they say, "Hey, we're looking for this person. Can you help us?" Okay, and I think who I can reach out to. Once I get into contact with these candidates, I screen them. I get to know kind of their current situation, what's going on, why they're looking for a new job, all these different things that we kind of screen candidates for and make sure that they're the right fit. And after that, we make the application on behalf of them. We kind of act as this like middle person between the candidate and the client, and we facilitate their application. So we help them schedule interviews, we give feedback, we get questions answered if they don't have the opportunity to ask it in an interview. We do offer negotiations, we do reference checks, and we do aftercare when people join the company. Ultimately, they start in their new job. We keep on talking to them. We say, "Hey, how is everything?" We relay that information to the company. So we still act as a buffer once they join as well. So we can kind of, or a buffer, or like this middle person. So that's the way, kind of from the start to
Well, no, that's
finish.
great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Let's jump back here a little bit because as we all know, I mean, for the most part, we're out of this COVID-19 pandemic. It's impacted people all over the world. And I'm curious to know how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the business and the business and the recruitment industry really as a whole, and how do you adapt to change? I mean, changes. I mean, obviously, I think now, at least here, I know in the States, and I know from speaking the experience from a lot of companies here in the States, I mean, things have changed into remote industry work. So how
Yeah.
has that changed?
Yeah, this has definitely changed the industry, and this has definitely changed how we work with candidates as well, and clients. So I think you said it, remote work, and in that sense, our job entails a lot of communication, meeting people, these screening calls, a lot of kind of yeah, it's really just a communication, human to human. So we would, before COVID-19, and we would meet candidates a lot. We would go visit them, grab a coffee, go to grab lunch, have in-person meetings, invite them to our office, all these kind of in-person communications. But once COVID hit, then of course we are not able to meet with the candidates and visit our clients, right? So we relied a lot on phone calls, online meetings, and I think the biggest thing was being able to develop these close relationships with our candidates and our clients as well, purely in a virtual environment. So I think that would be one of the biggest ways that we've seen the industry change, is relying a lot on these virtual like online meetings or phone calls to do our job, right? So I think also with outside of, let's say, purely the recruitment, how that's been affected on the candidate side and the client side, there's a lot of uncertainty. So clients would potentially be on, let's say, like hiring freezes, or have some uncertainty on how they would want to hire, because no one really knew how COVID-19 was going to affect, first of all, the economy, individual businesses, especially small businesses as well. So we work a lot with these startups. So I think within the industry, there's a lot of uncertainty, which kind of made it difficult for clients to continuously hire. So it was a little bit slow on that side. So jobs were a little bit scarce. But on the candidate side as well, seeing this, candidates would, I think, have this fear being a little bit uncertain and more risk adverse to joining, let's say, a smaller company, or even doing a job change during the pandemic. So I think everything slowed down. Things were very, very cautious. So for us, we had to find, of course, the types of candidates, the types of industries that would be hiring quite a bit, and helping even get like candidates, who are a little bit reluctant or hesitant, supporting them in the right ways to make sure that they're feeling confident in a job move during this kind of uncertain time. So I think during the COVID-19 pandemic, that really kind of slowed down the industry for recruitment, and we had to kind of adapt in a way which was entirely virtual.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it still to this day is still, we're still seeing a lot of virtual, but it's good to see things finally getting back to a more normal state.
Yeah.
Um, that said, let's now move forward. Well, again, I want to remind before actually we go any further that for those, again, just tuning in, or if you're either watching the podcast video wise on one of our video platforms, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, that you are either watching or listening to this podcast on the Cultural Connections podcast. We're live on Wednesday, April 26th, 2023 on Facebook. And today we are talking about a little bit behind the scenes look into recruitment. And we're joined by Junya Yoshida, who has started his own company in Tokyo, Japan in recruitment, and is giving us all sorts of insights into the field. So if you have questions for Junya today, please feel free to comment below here on Facebook. And I am watching the feed here, and I'll be sure we'll ask them live for you. That said, we're going to jump here to our next question here. And my next question to you is, could you walk us through a recent successful placement you made for a client and what made that candidate stand out?
Yeah, one that recently stood out, or that I can think of, it was actually one of the fastest placements that I've in my career. It was only a couple weeks, or 2-3 weeks. And usually, just to give some kind of idea, a recruitment process can last from 1 to, let's say, 2 months. Candidates going to interview, maybe 2, 3, 4 interviews over the once a week. Then there's going to be an offer. So it takes about a month's time, just maybe a little bit over. But with this recent placement, basically I was introduced to this company through a mutual connection. I heard from this mutual connection that this company needed some engineers. So they connected me with this company and I had a meeting with them, a virtual meeting, and they let me know what type of requirements they have. I got some information about the company, kind of their startup company and what they're doing, their business, their hiring plans, all this kind of information to help us do our job and speak to candidates on their behalf. So as soon as the client was going through the requirements for this engineer, the types of technology they're looking for, and the types of experience, I thought of a candidate in my head. It's a past candidate that I've worked with before. Very, very quickly, I figured, okay, this is the candidate I think is going to be good. So as soon as I got off the phone, or the online meeting with this client, I gave that candidate a call. I reached out to that candidate, and I basically introduced this company. Said, hey, I just met with this new company. They're looking for this type of this candidate. They need this. They need these types of skills for this role. Would you be interested? Had a chat with the candidate. He was interested, so we moved forward. I made the application on his behalf. Quickly, the client gave feedback. Said yes, let's meet with him. And they met actually in person. And from there, quick quick feedback was very good, matched the experience, matched in all the right places. So met with the CEO, the candidate met with the CEO. And then right after that, they said, yep, this person matches. We want to hire him. So from that point, I talked to the candidate, said, give him the good news, but also we started talking about an important stage of the placement process is the offer negotiation and understanding what, let's say, salary and working conditions, anything specific that they need. So in particular, like remote work, if that's something that is a big requirement for them, how we can negotiate on that side, things where we can negotiate as well. So I want to make sure the candidate joins basically on a good foot, feels good about it, and that usually entails having a good salary, competitive salary, and a working environment, and some like the needs met to a degree. Of course, you can't get everything you want, but things like remote work, flexible work hours, maybe, yeah, and salary. So then it's my job to communicate that to the client and negotiate on their behalf. So there was a little bit of back and forth, and we got a good offer for the candidate. The candidate was very, very happy, signed, and then quickly joined, actually. So it was very, very quick, and now that person is working there and is very happy. So that's kind of the process as a whole, but it was very, very quick, in comparison to in past placements. So just to give an idea, that was about maybe 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
But one of the longest placements I've had was, I think, it was over 6 months. So I had to, yeah, it was, there was some kind of back and forth. There was a long, things like visa, especially during the pandemic, that was an issue. So relying on visa applications, those things can get dragged out, obviously. So, you know, that process was my longest one, maybe 6 months or something like that.
Absolutely.
But
Again,
very, very quick.
2 to 3 weeks. So that's impressive. Absolutely.
It's quick.
Let's go on here. My next question to you will be then is let's start thinking about the future here as we move along here. And how do you see the recruitment industry evolving in the next 5 to 10 years? And what do you think will be some of the biggest challenges and opportunities?
Yeah, definitely AI. I'll say that. Let's start off with that, because that's something that is on my mind every single day. And so I think 5-10 years, we can see how fast, especially this year, how things have taken off and affected so many different industries and even just individuals in daily life. And I think what we're looking at here is people are going to be relying on these AI tools in a lot of different ways, and anything from writing your resume, screening resumes, writing a cover letter. These people, you can easily write this, using these, the generative, the language tools. And so those tools specifically, I think, will change how candidates are going to approach job searching, as well. And I think for us and recruiters specifically, we need to figure out how we can still be in an area where we can add value in the job process, the job search process. Ultimately, I think that, on the candidate side, you do want having the support of an actual person through your job search, and having that kind of advice of someone who has helped, as a recruitment agent, I've helped a lot of people get jobs, right? And so I've helped people from start to finish, and I think that having that support through your job search helps quite a bit, rather than just relying on, let's say, a chatbot or some sort of like tool that you can just, send your resume through, and it just, Yeah, the personal touch, exactly. And so how we can, I think on the candidate side, that's that can be, I wouldn't say relatively clear, but I can see, having that human touch is important. I think on the client side and how companies hire is going to be something that is going to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years. And we can see companies already, creating, let's say, in-house AI based tools to help them find candidates and help them screen candidates, help them put them through the interview process, do all the kind of a lot of the administrative tasks through this, like through the entire recruitment process. But also, I think another thing that's really going to affect is how they screen candidates as well. So one of our jobs, of course, is screening candidates for our clients. And as clients are able to use these AI tools, that job becomes less important. So we have to, of course, figure out how we can add value to our clients. And I think the way that how we're going to kind of adapt to that is going to be really important. It's going to be very important for agencies to have very good network of candidates, very close network of candidates, and offer kind of these, in a sense, your network and how you can reach out to candidates and match and kind of, in a sense, beat the tools and do things that tools can't do, for our clients. And I think ultimately, with we'll have to rely on more of the people aspect of things. So yeah, again, your network, how you can really utilize that and how you can really bring that and have your clients be able to tap into that. I think that's going to be one of the main areas in 5 to 10 years in the recruitment industry, how that's going to change. Outside of that, I think, yeah, the reliance on online tools and attracting candidates over, let's say, like social media and online platforms. With the pandemic, with COVID, people are using these platforms much more and relying on these platforms and
Right.
being online much more. So I think being able to grow your network through purely online is going to be very important over the next 5 to 10 years as well. And on the flip side is that as well, I think being kind of engaged and trying to take take some steps back as well and meet people in person. I think that's going to be able to help us stand out as well. So I think utilizing both online, but still having that kind of people aspect, because I think ultimately people are going to appreciate that when things are going to be so automated and so tool based and online based, having that in-person interaction is going to be appreciated, and relying on your people skills is going to be very important as well.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree further on that 100%. I again want to be, given the fact that we're coming near to the end of the podcast, we have a few more minutes, but I want to one more time before we get there, remind all of our viewers that are either watching this podcast or listening to this podcast. This is the Cultural Connections podcast. We are live on Wednesday, April 26, 2023. And we are live on Facebook, and we are talking about a behind the scenes look into recruitment. And we're joined by Junya Yoshida, who has his own company in recruitment in Tokyo, Japan. So again, even if you still have questions and we're within the last few minutes of the podcast, please feel free to comment below here on Facebook. Even if we're not live, we'll still get the questions to him and we'll get them answered for you, even if you don't get a chance to ask while we're live. So within the last few minutes, my last question to you, we'll end on this question, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about the recruitment industry, and how do you address them?
Yeah, I think this is important because this is something that ultimately led me to create a company. And I think that some of the misconceptions are, recruiters are just money hungry and they're just going to make money off of your job change, and that's all they really want. And I think that a lot of people, maybe they have used recruiters before. There are recruiters out there that are like that, and unfortunately, but there are recruiters out there that really care and really want to support candidates and clients in the best way. And you know, if that ultimately, let's say, there's been times, for example, in my experience where a candidate, I'm helping them get a job, and I get the offer from the client, and the candidate has other really good offers. You know, you can't necessarily push so much, because this is such an important thing on the candidate side. This is a life-changing decision, and you always have to let the candidate make the final decision. And I think that people have the experience of recruiters being very pushy, but there are recruiters out there that truly have your best interests in mind and want to support you in the best way. And so working with recruiters, you know, it's important to find the right recruiter. It's important to develop your relationship with your recruiter, because ultimately that's going to help them create it's going to give you a closer relationship where they can support you in the best way, rather than just have someone send your CV out, get a job, and say, hey, take it type of thing. So that's a misconception, that, you know, recruiters are kind of money hungry. And I think another misconception is, you know, we just get your CV and send it. And I think that also is not the case. That happens a lot. And unfortunately, I think that, you know, this really, the key thing is finding a recruiter that you can work very closely with, and build that trust and relationship with, because then they're going to take the time to really review your resume, really review your skills. They're going to work with you. They're going to talk with you and say, oh, actually, you mentioned this during our meeting. It's not on your resume. Let's put it in there. Let's write it this way. You know, your experience, actually, what you mentioned to me previously, or the last role that you were in, I know you were doing this. Maybe we should do like add this in this certain way to your resume, because the resume, you know, resume is really important, and that's going to be your first chance to put your foot through the door, foot in the door to a client. And that's going to be your impression. And so
Right.
it's really important for us to help at that stage. But I think that a lot of people think that we just get the CV and we just send it. But that's not the case. We're going to take our time, and we're going to help you. And we're going to, you know, if there's anything that we need to change, or you know, any advice we have, we're gonna of course share that with you. So those are a couple of misconceptions. I think that maybe on the client side as well, sometimes companies expect us to have a database full of hundreds of thousands of candidates that we can just instantly reach out to. That's not the case. I don't think that's the case in any agency.
Right.
Once we get job requirements, there's going to be a pool that we can access very quickly. But who knows? Maybe candidates are not going to be open. Maybe the candidate doesn't want to apply to that job. Maybe the candidate is not open to new opportunities at the moment. So it's going to, you know, there's not going to be a case. Maybe you know, these candidates are open, so we will be able to send profiles very quickly, but it's going to take some time. We don't have a, you know, massive pool of candidates that we can just instantly access. It takes time to reach out to them, have conversations. They have their own life going on, so it takes them time to review the company and the opportunities. So there is some time, and it takes to kind of walk them through the process and get that, which leads the client to ultimately having a resume in front of them to review. So maybe that's a misconception on the client side, that we can instantly access a ton of candidates, but it does take time on our side as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's great. It's hard to think that we've already gone through an entire podcast. I think you've enlightened all of us here into the world of recruitment, and given us a really great glimpse into a behind the scenes look. So again, thank you to Junya
Yeah,
here for joining us today on the podcast. Once
it's a
again,
pleasure.
Thank you. Once again, I always say to our audience, if you have questions or comments or suggestions for future episodes of the podcast, please don't hesitate to contact with me. You can reach me via email by emailing brianives@gmail.com. That's BRIANIV as in Victor, ES@gmail.com. And please feel free to send any questions, comments, or suggestions. And if you have questions that you did want to ask Junya today during the podcast, either email them or comment below if you're watching on Facebook, or if you're watching it on YouTube, comment on the YouTube video, and we will get those questions over to Junya and make sure we get them answered, or you can email them to me as well. Again, thank you to Junya for joining me today, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Cultural Connections Podcast. I'm Brian Ives, and I'm the producer and host of the Cultural Connections Podcast. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you again for watching this episode of the Cultural Connections Podcast. For more information on today's episode, be sure to check out our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also watch this episode again in its entirety on our YouTube channel. This podcast is also available on listening platforms Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Breaker, Radio Public, and New TV. Thanks again for watching this episode of the Cultural Connections Podcast.